The current season of Doctor Who Shooty second is now reaching its conclusion. The big epic two-part finale has begun with part 1, Wishworld, and here are my initial thoughts on the story. Slightly belated, but it kind of feels fitting because this was just like such a crazy, insane, bonkers story that I think I kind of need a few days to actually process what happened and kind of work out what I thought. I think a lot of people have had a similar thing there, and I think the reaction has been quite polarised from what I've seen. You know, a lot of people found it very exciting and stimulating, like conceptually as well, with this parallel reality and the whole kind of Orwellian vibe to that. A lot of people also, from what I've seen, have said, you know, oh, it felt like a parody with all these flashbacks, all these villains, all this reliance on the past and kind of calling back constantly and bringing all these things in, all these old characters and plot lines and what have you. And ultimately, I do fall more into the first camp. I did enjoy this. I found it very exciting. Kind of what a finale should be, really, and I preferred it to the first part of last year's finale, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, because I think in that case, I mean, even though, again, that was quite an exciting story to watch with all the stuff going on and all these returning characters and the shenanigans with units, it felt like kind of treading water to get to the cliffhanger, the reveal of Sutek. It felt like kind of going over stuff we already knew about Ruby and her birth, and just kind of recapping the plot so far there with the whole time window sequence. And although you could sort of say the same stuff about this story in the sense that it is just basically in a building to this reveal that, well, let's just say, Omega is apparently back. Not only the Rani, not only the two Ranis, but Omega as well. And we're kind of going into this Gallifreyan lore. Yes, okay, it's 45 minutes just to get to that point, but I think it is more than that, personally speaking. I think, you know, conceptually it was very, very interesting indeed. I loved the whole thing with the Wishworld, with the Doctor and Belinda, you know, waking up at the start, and it's like, okay, we've got these familiar characters that we know, the audience, but they're living out this false reality, and okay, we've seen similar stuff to this in the show before, like with Human Nature and the Family of Blood, or the simulated life that Donna experiences in Forest of the Dead, and again with the dystopian vibe as well. You know, the show has tapped into that before, say in The Lie of the Land, for instance, just to name one example, the most prominent example, I would say, from the show's past. So yeah, not entirely original from that point of view, but hey, it's a good idea, you know, this stuff, and I think it works, and I think actually this felt fresh enough and like a kind of a fresh enough take on those ideas, you know, with the whole kind of thing, I suppose, tapping back into this kind of recurring theme from this series with Alan David Bird and then with Conrad as well, obviously reappearing in the story, this thing of like conspiracy nuts or incels or kind of, yeah, these very warped realities, old-fashioned kind of views about how the world should be, you know, not kind of progressing, not moving with the times. That all really worked for me and made it feel distinct from something like the world of The Lie of the Land, where yes, okay, it's another dystopia, but it's not as complex in terms of the ideas and the values that are underpinning this world and the way it is. For instance, here, the whole slip thing with the mugs kind of smashing every time someone slips up or kind of doubts, I suppose, or kind of gets closer to the truth. That harks back to George Orwell, to 1984, but the whole thing with like sexuality and the Doctor's sexuality as well, the whole thing of not being able to find another man beautiful, etc., that added a new dimension to it and made it feel like a kind of very 2025 dystopia. And I love it when Doctor Who does stuff like that, for instance, in Forest of the Dead, Human Nature, those stories that I've already mentioned, where the characters are living these alternative kind of lives, these false realities, and in the back of your head constantly throughout, there's this whole thing of like, at some point, they're going to have to realise what's up. They're going to have to give up this life that they've built. And it's like, oh my god, that's such a heartbreaking idea. And yeah, it lends a whole uneasy atmosphere to the whole thing. You know, we get that in this story with Belinda slowly realising that although she's got this child Poppy, you know, she doesn't remember giving birth to her or going through labour. And that sequence where she runs into the woodlands afterwards, it's like, oh my god, that's such a disturbing image of her just like screaming out into the void. I've seen people poke fun at that moment and say, oh, it's ridiculous, it doesn't make sense, why is it in there, you know, it doesn't work. But actually, I think it is a really horrible, disturbing image, and the way the episode cuts between stuff like that, and then those sequences of Conrad reading from his storybook, like in a CBeebies Storytime presenter, Doctor Who did this, Doctor Who did that, the Time Lady, Gallifrey, all that stuff really worked for me. You know, again, not an original idea, it harks back to 1984 with like this idea of political broadcasts kind of keeping everybody in check, but it's a timeless idea, it's a great idea, it works, it's immediately unsettling, the fact that he's being kept prisoner by the two Ranis as well just adds the whole extra dimension to it. Like, you know, he's not actually in charge, he's actually the prisoner of somebody else, or like working for somebody else. He's been kept in this room, kind of forced to make these broadcasts, even though he agrees with this world and the way it is, and he's kind of wishing it and willing it into existence. He's still not fully in control himself. A similar thing with Mrs. Flood, you know, Anise Dobson's character, now finally revealed to be an incarnation, or more like a kind of splinter, I suppose, of the Rani, of her personality. You know, again, we see her in this story, like literally making the sandwiches, which is a slightly weird scene, but yeah, like making a sandwich for Conrad and literally like complaining about the fact that she's having to do all these dirty jobs and all this kind of stuff. Elsewhere, we see her like relishing the fact that she gets to be a police officer, going around, rounding people up, all these doubters, etc., taking them prisoner. But yeah, there are definitely hints there with her character that maybe she's going to rebel or like turn against the other Rani. It's a really interesting one. Like, she could go her own way, Conrad could go his own way. You know, all these villains are sort of working together, but it feels like the kind of the alliance they've got is slightly hanging by a thread and could kind of fall apart at any time. We've got all these horrible personalities, spearheaded, of course, by our new Rani, Archie Punjabi, who, yeah, is, again, just despicable and horrible and, like, ew, making your skin crawl. Like, from that very first sequence where she turns all the kids into ducks or whatever it is. You know, it's a bit random, but hey, it works. Yeah, it's, like, unsettling and dark and really cements her as an evil character, or like a character who just has no regards for morals and stuff, which is always the thing with the Rani in the classic series. I think Archie is excellent in the role. I think the fact that she's a little bit older than Ncuti helps there as well, just to make her feel like a bit more of a threat and kind of, yeah, more in command and in control. I love the sequence at the end as well, where she's kind of slowly revealing to him, you know, who he is, like he's the Doctor, and what's happening, and the fact that his whole life, or the whole life that he thinks he's lived as John Smith, is a lie. That was just fantastic. It kind of really put me in mind of something like, you know, the Master in the Series 3 finale. Again, with the Valiant there, up in the sky. Here we have the Bone Palace. A lot of kind of throwbacks there. You know, for Lucy Saxon, maybe read, you know, Conrad or Mrs. Flood. I know that some people felt that final 10 minutes or so was a bit too talky, a bit too exposition heavy. It's even referred to in the script. You know, the Rani acknowledges that what she's saying is exposition, but there's a greater purpose to it, and I can kind of see that, you know, fair enough to an extent, but I do think as well the sequence was just so thrilling and exciting, you know, building to this cliffhanger, these gradual reveals of what's going on, like the Doctor realising, Belinda realising, you know, that she's not Belinda, or she's Belinda, but she's not the Belinda from this story, from this world, and the whole thing about Poppy as well, the reveal of the two Ranis, the gradual kind of building up of like Gallifrey and Time Lords, leading to that climax of Omega, that cliffhanger, and a really good old-fashioned cliffhanger as well, where like the Doctor is kind of being plunged into the depths of, well, I suppose the Underverse, but like falling off on that balcony bit. I thought that was a great image, and I thought as well the moment where the Doctor kind of like finally realises properly who he is again, and he gets his memories back, and like we get that flashback sequence with all the Doctors so far. That was like a proper defining moment for his Doctor. It kind of like felt like a real like endgame moment almost. If this does prove to be his final story, if he does regenerate next week, it's like here's like a big climactic hero moment for this Doctor in his final story. So overall, yes, I did really like this story. It worked for me. Yes, okay, there are kind of cracks there, or things where, like, if you pick at it, you know, yes, things maybe don't quite add up, or, like, there are these things like the constant flashbacks, which are becoming slightly grating now at this point, but I can overlook that, I think, just about with this part, at least. I mean, we shall see how it's all wrapped up next week in the Reality War. I wasn't a fan of Empire of Death last year. There were moments that I liked, but I think the way the plot kind of grinds to a halt, and we move to the memory TARDIS, and it's just the Doctor and Mel and Ruby kind of like sitting around, moping around. The whole business with the woman with the last spoon in the universe, or whatever that was about, like, I did not like that at all. So hopefully we get a stronger kind of payoff here. There's certainly a lot going on with the return of Omega, you know, with the two Ranis still, and obviously on the board as well. Conrad, the Doctor, Ruby, Belinda, Unit, all these characters, lots going on. But yes, I'm looking forward to it. I'm cautiously optimistic. We shall see. But what were your thoughts about Wishworld Part 1 of the big 2-part finale? And what are your hopes for and theories about the reality war? You know, what's Omega going to look like? What's he going to be up to? What's this plan that Rani has about bringing back Gallifrey? How is it all going to resolve? And is the 15th Doctor going to regenerate? Let me know all of your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Please also leave a like if you have enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel if you're new for more coverage of the Season 2 finale. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.